Catus, Maximus here, this time with a little review of this KAL USA 3/8" sliding T-handle breaker bar. Now, I kind of do these individual videos about KAL. It's a little bit hard to for me to do research and find information on them. They weren't a particularly common tool brand, and they made somewhere back maybe 80s, 90s. I don't know if they've primarily focused on corporate and government contracts or if they just sold in more independent auto stores, but just haven't found a lot of information. Don't run into a lot of KAL tools, but I do run into a few of them, so they're relatively common. One of the things that I do notice is I've reviewed some of their, like a little ratchet, some of their other tools, is they had tools, American-made tools, they had Korean-made tools, and they had Japanese-made tools, such as I've picked up a couple of extensions along with this that were also KAL Japan. Anyway, not a bad little tool. They would seem to be about average grade. I would say probably about the same grade as Craftsman. They're not perfect. We can see how offset this little flat is, but we can see the ball detent here. Let me get this a little bit more focused. You can see that the stamp just wasn't very well centered at all, and so it actually wasn't pressed in along this edge. We can see the ball sticking out pretty far. It's still holding in there because the stamp's pretty deep, but the reason that you really want it centered is if this tool is obviously not very well used, but if you do put a lot of hours on it, pulling a lot of sockets on and off of it, then the issue is that the ball starts to wear on this little edge. When you stamp it, all it's doing is squishing the metal in just so that the ball won't pop out, but it'll start wearing on it and eventually the ball will end up popping out. So that's kind of a disappointment. Not a particularly strong detent. I'd say it's average, but there are some other issues. We can see that they do have balls on each end of this, and that's on T-handles, prevent them sliding through, but you can see this one's really a little bit too deep and almost allows a handle to pull through. So the quality of these just wasn't particularly great. They do have a pretty shallow undercut, but that's enough. I mean, the purpose of the T-handle is, one, it's a breaker bar, and they tend to be stronger than the traditional, what they call swivel handle breaker bars, just because these operate on a fork. Some of them have bigger heads, but something like a T-handle is just a straight steel bar with a big billet machined head, and usually on these what fails is either the square twists off or this handle will bend. Or on more traditional breaker bars, it's usually some kind of issue with the forks or the little cross pin ends up failing. Once again, not the greatest. Like I said, around Craftsman quality. It seems almost like it was made by the same manufacturer, but probably not. A nicer one might be this Williams, just because it has a slightly more compact head and a little notch, which is something that this KAL is missing. One of the issues is, of course, if you have something long on there and you're trying to reach into an area, it wants to flop around. And it would have been nice, and not a lot of manufacturers do this, to put a little lip. If you have a little lip, then what ends up happening is the ball can sit in there. So if you're in an awkward position, actually it's not even particularly deep on this Williams with this big extension, but the idea is that it kind of holds it just a little bit more straight and maybe prevent the head from swiveling around. Anyway, let me grab the right one here. It's my little video, my little review of this KAL. I do like it, and it's kind of interesting to run into one of their American-made tools, but once again, it's nothing to write home about, and certainly nothing I would pay too much money for. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. Till next time, Catus Maximus out.